is Matthew Runner for Extra Credit, showing off building a PC. So here we've got the back and the front open already in the case, and we've got all of our cables already routed. It is a modular power supply, so I have, well, this will be the chassis fans, your 24-pin ATX SATA cables already routed, your LEDs, your power button, your reset, front panel USB 3.0, and your front panel audio and PCIe power cables here. So we've already routed it all through the back here. So what we're gonna do, we've got a 650 watt modular power supply here, which is more than enough for this build, running about a 270, a GTX 270 mini and an i7, so 650 watts is more than enough. I do run Plex on this, so I'm always adding more hard drives and more storage, so I like to have a little bit of wiggle room. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to put all of our cables in here. Here we've got the 4x4 for the CPU power. Here we've got your PCIe power. Here is part of the 24-pin ATX. The other half of the 24-pin. Make sure that's all seated. And then we do have our SATA here as well. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to slide that into the case. Make sure our holes line up. Got the screws here. We'll get that screwed in. Alright, since we've got the back open here, we're actually going to go ahead and put in our HDD that we have. And then we'll close up the back. We've got to make sure that we have the SATA for data. And then we've got power. I always like to leave an extra SATA cable back here because, like I said, you never know when you're going to need to add another hard drive. So then get that into the bay. We go. Like I said, free one in there just in case we decide we want to add like a solid state up here, and the power is already plugged into the PSU as well. So we're good, and now we can close up the back. Now we're going to do a little bit of work on the motherboard before we put it into the case. Since this is a pre-existing build, I already do have the CPU socketed. I did, however, take off the existing thermal paste with isopropyl alcohol, and it can't hurt to put some new thermal paste in. So we will do that before we put the heatsink in. Upon opening this build to take it apart, I realized that I'm still running the stock cooler on it that came with the CPU, which quite frankly probably is not enough for this build. But that being said, that means there's a trip to Micro Center in my future here coming up. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to apply some new thermal paste. And we're going to get, like I said, this is a stock cooler. We're going to get that seated in here. The pins are getting a little, I guess, bent a little bit from taking it out from the previous build and then this build. So we're going to make sure that we don't break the plastic as we put it in there. Spin these to lock in place. We're good. And then we're going to plug this into our CPU fan header so it gets power. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put in my RAM. Since this is kind of a Frankenstein build, I do have two different kits here. They are all 16 gigabyte modules, and all 2400 megahertz clock speed. But we are going to make sure that the matching ones are in matching pairs. So we're going to put them in every other slot. Obviously want to click. Like I said, we're going to alternate these. Just going to make sure we hear the click. Then we're going with the one for the first pair. And the last module. Got that. The other thing that we're going to install while we're at it is going to be an M.2 Drive. It's just 256 gigabytes. I usually like to put OS on a drive like that. It's usually the fastest, and it doesn't get bloated up with everything else. Make sure I got the correct screw. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna slot it in here like that. Get our screw. Good. Now that we've got the motherboard ready, so that is all we're going to do. Drop and mount into the case. We're going to get the input-output shield in first. It just clicks into the case. Looks like we're nice and seated, not pinching any cables. We can get the motherboard lined up with the input-output shield, lined up with the posts, making sure not to put any cables underneath. Before I go ahead and mount it by screwing it in, I always like to do the CPU cable first, since it's way back here kind of in a corner. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get that in. Just makes it easier sometimes in case you have to kind of shimmy around. We're gonna make sure that that's seated correctly. We're good. And we are good to start screwing in the motherboard. So with the motherboard mounted, now we need to make sure that we get all of everything plugged in where it belongs. We already have the CPU cable put in for the power. Like I said, sometimes that can be difficult to get in there. Here we have our chassis fans, which are going to go into the header right here. They're nothing fancy with RGB or anything, so just fans. Then we have our ATX power cable, which we're going to see right here. Make sure it clicks. Here I have SATA cables. One of these goes to the HDD that we put in, and the other one is, like I said, just there in case I decide that I want to add another drive at some point. Don't have to go back through cable management. Make sure those are seated correctly. Here we have our the USB 3.0 that goes to the front panel ports. This one always makes me a little nervous because those pins are very easy to bend. Got the click, looks like it went in easy that time. Here we have the front audio panel header. And then here, this one is always a blast. So for the power switch and the LEDs and the such, I always recommend looking at the instruction manual. But since this is an older motherboard, we have at one point misplaced it. So I had to grab a flashlight to take a look at what is named on the motherboard itself. Most importantly, here we have the power switch. Hard drive LED. The reset switch. And the power LEDs. Both negative and then positive. All right. So we've got all of the case set up. Everything has power. We have one last thing to install, and that is going to be the graphics card. You always want to put it closest to the CPU for obvious reasons, for speed. Make sure it sits into the PCIe slot. For the click, we need to mount it in. Eventually I'll put a full-size graphics card in here, but this machine's not for gaming. It's usually, the graphics card is just there for video transcoding in my Plex server, so it doesn't get too much use, but it's good to have it in there. So we're nice and solid in there. And then we have to make sure that we put in power to it. And with that, we have put everything together. We just need to make sure it posts now. All right, now for the moment of truth, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna make sure that it posts. So here we've got a power cable, plug right into the PSU. Big thing here is to make sure that your switch is set to on. I made that mistake before. And I'm going to plug in an HDD HDMI to an external monitor to see if we get BIOS too. So here we go. Got power, red light, yellow light. Looks like we've got, well, oh, it's probably trying to run through and figure out what's going on with the memory. Green light. We have posted. And we have indeed booted into Windows. And just for verification, once again, I am Matthew Runner, and this is for Extra Credit. Thank you very much.